So, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about John Brown. John Brown was an abolitionist. He was anti-slavery. He was quite radical. To some people, he was considered a hero. To some people, he was considered a madman. He really believed that it was his God-given duty to fight against slavery by any means necessary. Him and Malcolm X would have gotten along well. So, however, his means for creating this change in our country were sometimes violent. He was very controversial. He, at one point, led a revolt called Bleeding Kansas, where 5 pro-slavery folks were killed. He definitely believed in using violence to make radical change in American society. So depending on your perspective and depending on the testimony presented today, you will decide if John Brown is guilty or not of the 3 counts that will be presented. Now, what's interesting about John Brown is many people thought he was a hero because as an American, he took it into his hands to rebel against a government that he thought was unjust and was oppressing his people. So, it's interesting to look back at John Brown now. Now, the incident that we're focusing on today is the siege at Harper's Ferry. So, I'm going to read this little part for you. Americans were shocked in October of 1859 when they heard that Virginia officials had taken into custody John Brown, the angry abolitionist from Kansas. He had tried to start a massive slavery revolt in the South. To Southerners, Brown was a fanatic because he wanted to abolish slavery in a bloodbath. To Northerners, he was either a madman or a saint, driven by a fiery moral conscience that was forcing inevitable conflict between the 2 regions. Just 18 months after this incident, the Civil War began in America. So, some people believe he was a catalyst for bringing about the ultimate dissolution of our country. So, the prosecution and defense have been working really hard. Listen really carefully to the testimony presented. Our jury over here is going to take notes and be really actively listening and trying to put the pieces of this story together and think about some of the foundations of our own country and its history and the choices individuals have made to be upstanders or, in some cases, to be violent or non-violent. Thank you very much. So, give my kids a round of applause, please. Okay, you were in a crowded courtroom in Charlestown, Virginia in late October of 1859. The courtroom is packed with 500 to 600 spectators. Another 1,000 persons are outside milling around in the street. Prosecution may enter and take their places. The defense attorneys may enter the courtroom and take your places.
I plead not guilty.
Biehl, please stand and jury. Will the jury please stand and raise your right hands? Will you as a jury in this case carefully carry your duties as an open-minded judge of the testimony and evidence presented for and against the defendant, and swear to fairly judge him on the basis of the charge brought against him, If you do so swear to say I do swear.
I do swear.
Be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant is to be given a fair trial. I am bound to execute our laws faithfully, but I must hold that anyone accused of a crime is innocent until proven guilty by an honest, independent, and impartial jury of this country. If guilty, he will pay the extreme penalty for his guilt. Be fair and judge only on the evidence. If the prosecution is ready, they may now make their opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as I begin my opening remarks, I would like to remind you that this trial is not about morals. It is about committing crime. John Brown has committed murder, conspiracy, and treason, for which he shall be found guilty with the evidence that we have presented before you today. John Brown and his 21 men took over the Harper's Ferry arsenal and took over 60 hostages. While this siege was happening, John Brown and his 5 sons viciously murdered 5 innocent men, and one free black man, Shepard Hayworth, was killed by one of John Brown's men. If this was you, if this was one of your families or loved ones, you would be scared. You would fear John Brown, would you not? So why should you let John, a man who has killed 5 innocent men and 1 free black slave, go? George Phelps, a conductor for the Baltimore and Ohio train, personally saw a document written by John Brown himself. It personally stated that John Brown was completely intent on overthrowing the Virginian government and creating his own government. The definition of treason states that the crime of planning to kill the sovereign or to overthrow the government, John Brown has clearly done so. There should be no question about it, and I ask the people of the jury to keep this in mind when determining John Brown's fate. John Brown had a plan that he believed would abolish slavery. His inability to talk about anything but slavery left many with the impression that he had an obsession with a new plan to orchestrate a slave revolt in the South. To Southerners, Brown was a fanatic because he wanted to abolish slavery in Woodland. Conspiracy is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or unharmful. John Brown's plan was both. It was illegal because in 1859, Virginia still thought of slavery as legal. 5 innocent men died at the hands of John Brown, and 60 people were taken hostage at Harper's Ferry. This evidence proves his disconcern for the citizens of Harper's Ferry in the law of Virginia, making known his intentions to start a slave revolt in order to abolish slavery for his own selfish reasons. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is where I bring to the point that we are not looking at John Brown's morals, or the way he treated his hostages, or even the fact that he is an old man. We are here today because of facts. The evidence that John Brown has committed treason, murder, and conspiracy is stacked against him. I hope that you will find it in your hearts to think about the facts that have and will be presented before you today. John Brown is guilty. That is all I got.
The defense attorney may now make their opening statements to this court.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, John Brown, is an innocent man. Mr. Brown is not guilty of any act of treason, murder, or conspiracy. The prosecution cannot possibly prove that Brown is guilty of the charge of treason against Virginia, when in fact, he's not even a resident of the state. The jurisdiction to handle such a crime falls to the federal government because Harper's Ferry is a federal armory. Thus, the charge of treason should be dropped. There was no murder committed by John Brown. It was self-defense from the wild shots fired by the townspeople taking law into their own hands and trying to be soldiers. The charge of conspiracy to overthrow the government should be dropped as well. It clearly states in the Constitution that it is not illegal to overthrow the government. It is in fact not only one's right but one's obligation to overthrow the government if it is being destructive to the common good of the United States of America. There is nothing more destructive than the institution of slavery. My client, Mr. Brown, was acting upon his own good morals. It states in the Constitution that the liberty for everyone to do what he lists and to live as he pleases and not to be tried by any laws but freedom of men under government is. To have standing rule by, to live by common common laws, but freedom of men, no. To everyone, the society and made by the legislative power erect in it, a liberty to follow my own will in all things, so I prescribe not, and not to be subject to inconsistent, uncertain, unknowing, arbitrary will of another man. As freedom of nature is, to be under no restraint and to live under the law of nature. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is a good man. He's a man of faith. So I plead you, have faith in humanity. Have faith in my client, John Brown. And the charges against him are not only unreasonable, but they are unfair.
The prosecution calls first witness. Prosecution calls George Phelps to the stand.
Mr. Phelps, what is your profession?
My profession is a train conductor on the Baltimore and Ohio train.
And what were you doing on the night of October 16th?
As I said, I was conducting the Baltimore and Ohio train.
What was your reaction to the shooting of Shepard Hayward, a free black man?
Guilty and sad that an innocent man has been murdered.
Did you ever see or talk to John Brown?
I did see John Brown, but I didn't talk to him directly one-on-one.
What were you doing after leaving Harper's Ferry in the early hours of October 17th?
I quickly got the train over the river, and I didn't stop until I reached Mama Case in Maryland.
Did you ever return to Harper's Ferry?
Yes, I did.
What did Brown say at this so-called press conference?
I heard him talk about his goals and his real reasons why he tried to seize the arresting.
When the defendant talked about a provisional government, army, Secretary of State, and even a Negro congressman, what was your reaction to Brown and the charges against him?
My reaction is that this raid was an act of conspiracy against our government proving treason. Yet I realized he didn't have the intention to harm anything or anybody.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I'd like to prosecute
Proceed.
Mr. Phelps, is it true that John Brown guaranteed the safety of the train and the passengers?
Yes, it is.
And did John Brown follow through with his promise?
Yes, he did.
Was it Brown's orders that got the innocent men killed?
I'm not sure, but I'm assuming because John Brown, a couple hours later, while the man was shot, he had joined my train. What was he doing on the other side of the river? How did he know that I was there?
And Mr. Phelps, concerning the shooting of the baggage master, Shepard Hayward, how do you know that one of John Brown's men shot him?
First of all, I wasn't in town. I was outside about to cross a bridge. Why would a town people or person want to cross a bridge, even though it's not like, walking? And what a coincidence, as I said, how about 3 to 4 hours later, John Brown joined my train.
And did you personally witness any of Brown's men harmed? No further questions, Your Honor.
Colonel Washington, you are related to General Washington, are you not?
Yes, sir, I am his great grandnephew.
How did you become a hostage of John Brown?
It was was Sunday, October 16th, around 1 or 2 in the morning when I heard a man calling me. I awoke to find 5 or 6 men in my hallway, 3 of which had rifles tucked in.
Were you mistreated in any way?
No, I was not.
What did Brown's men do or say to you when they took you hostage? For example, did they reveal their purpose?
At first, no. After getting changed, because I was curious about the whole friends that were with them, I noticed that there was a fourth man with a pistol looking through my room closet who asked me a few questions.
When and where did you meet Captain Brown?
The engine house.
How were you and the others treated while prisoners in the engine house?
He treated us fairly. We were able to eat and freely roam the engine house just as long as we were trying to.
You were allowed to eat, no?
Yes, but I did not eat, for I was concerned that the cook had poisoned food.
What weapons did Brown carry?
Brown had carried a broadsword given to George Washington by Frederick the Great.
Did Brown tell you why he took hostages?
No, he did not.
How many hostages and members of his army were in the engine house?
Before the Marines had stormed the engine house, there were 11 hostages, 1 of which was me, 7 of Brown's men, and Brown himself. After the Marines charged the engine house, I'd say there was around 90 to 1.
Tell us, Colonel Washington, about what happened, or what was said, just prior to and during the Marine siege and capture of the engine house.
He had picked me and 9 other hostages as ransom to the Marines so he could go off free. When that failed, he told us to get behind cover so we would be safe from the trust fight.
Did you ever see Brown again, that is, before today?
No, I did not.
That is all wrong.
Defense would like to cross-examine complaints. Mr. Washington, did Captain Brown ever shoot or kill anyone during the entire trip?
As far as I know, no.
Did he ever threaten your life?
No, I did not.
How are you treated as a hostage?
As I said before, he treated us fairly. We were able to roam the engine house freely and eat just as long as we did try anything.
You, sir, are a descendant of the great first president, George Washington. How do you think him and the founding fathers would fail if they saw all today's current state of slavery when they themselves believed that all men were created equal?
I believe that him being a slaveholder himself would approve of the slaveholding, but he wouldn't approve of the actions that they had been doing to the slaves and what our great nation has come to.
Sir, if you don't mind, I'd like you to read this to bracket.
The treason clause applies only to only disloyal acts committed during the times of war.
So, are we in fact in times of war? So, Captain John Brown cannot be accused of treason, though, correct?
I would say no.
So, no treason.
In some cases, depending on what he did.
No further questions, sir.
Here to see it. Prosecution calls on said law to the stand. Someone said it's on the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I said wrong. On the night of October 16, 1856, you were taken hostage, am I correct? Yes. And how were you taken hostage?
It was around 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was asleep, and I was awake into a disturbance, so I went to investigate. And when I walked into the engine room, 3 of Brown's men had guns and giving me some shit.
So being a hostage, how were you treated?
Well, I've never been taken hostage before, and I'm alive as far as fairly.
Alright. And did Brown ever allow you any special advantages, such as leaving the rail yards?
He let me go home to reassure my family that I was okay and to have breakfast with him, but I was escorted and had to go back to the engine house.
Okay. And I understand you performed a heroic deed while you were hostage.
scared, and he said he won't surrender if he and his men could escape. So the Marines busted into the engine house, and Lieutenant Green rushed towards Brown and hit him right in the head with his sword and knocked him unconscious.
So Lieutenant Green took John Brown captive.
Yes.
No further questions? Your Honor, the defense would like to cross-examine the witness. Proceed.
Mr. Ball, could being under stress while hostage cause you to react if you were held by a madman who wanted to free slaves? But in reality, you never heard Brandon say such things.
No, I did hear them say that. He told me what he was determined to do.
How were you treated as a hostage?
Fairly, I would say.
Mr. Brown, that you go home to your family now that you're fine, correct?
Yes.
And you still thought he was a madman?
Yes. Well, I really want to say madman, that's just the word.
Are you sure that the words Mr. Brown are you sure the words of Brown when you testified that he said are accurate in their detail?
So what I remember is,
Do you believe all men created equal?
yes.
If so, then why are slaves different?
That's not for me to say. Does this have anything to do with what Brown did?
Lieutenant Green beat Mr. Brown in the head repeatedly when he was unconscious.
He hit him until he knocked out.
After the way Brown treated you, why did you help him?
Can you repeat that, please?
After the way Brown treated you, why did you help him? After he was given to you.
Because the Marines were rushing into the engine house, so it was a bunch of executed.
That's all the questions. You may proceed. Does the prosecution have any more witnesses to call? No, Your Honor, no, sir. Very well. Will the defense please call its first witness?
Defense calls Joseph Brewer to stand.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Mr. Brewer, how did you become the hostage of John Brown?
Well, I was walking on my normal routine like I do every day, and when I came back, I ran into John Brown's men, and they kindly asked me to walk a few blocks down to where.
So he was a peaceful man from what you saw, yes?
Yes,
Were Brown's men ever wounded by the gunfire which came from the citizens of Harper's Ferry?
yes, Aaron Stevens was shot multiple times.
And do you remember who started the fire first?
The citizens,
So it was self-defense then, yes?
yes,
Do you have any sympathy for Captain Brown after spending nearly 2 days with him?
yes, I do. He lost his two sons, and he nearly lost his own life.
And did you personally witness any of the hostages being tortured in any way by John Brown or his men?
Not at all.
And did John Brown or his men ever talk about hurting any of the witnesses that you heard of?
Not at all.
What were the conditions like when you were being held?
They were fairly well. We were treated fairly well taken care of in the record.
Was your life ever personally threatened by John Brown?
No, never.
What kind of language did John Brown use to you and the other hostages?
Non-violent, very peaceful.
And did you feel safe being held by John Brown?
Yes, very safe.
That is all yours.
The prosecution would like to cross-examine this witness.
Could it be possible that you were never close enough to Brown to overhear any personal conversation?
Yes, that is correct.
Our personal congratulations to you, Mr. Brewer. For your heroics in saving the life of prisoner Aaron Stevens. What made you risk your life to save a man who for nearly 2 days held you captive?
Well, after he was shot, he was still breathing, so I decided to save him because you don't just leave him having to die.
That is all.
Your Honor, the president held a personal that Raise your right hand. Please solemnly swear yourself to the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Please state your name.
Archibald Smith.
What post were you posted at when you were in the hostage?
I was the watchman of the armory.
How were you and others treated?
Mr. Brown was not the insane that he's portrayed as people. He was very complex.
Mr. Brown sent you and Joseph Brewer out to talk to the townspeople Aaron Stevens. Why?
We were sent out because of our influence. We were supposed to make a flat truce with the townspeople.
What was the flat truce?
We were supposed to make a peace treaty with them.
How did the townspeople violate the flat truce?
They shot at us.
Did you see Mr. Brown as a madman and you were held hostage?
Not at all.
That's it, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to cross-examine this witness. Proceed.
Mr. Kitzmiller, after taken hostage by John Brown and those men,
I was afraid, but he did show us kindness that he never killed anyone.
and did Brown ever make comments on his views of Negroes or slaveholders?
They were, he found them.
Objection, Your Honor, this question has been asked and answered.
Sustained.
Mr. Kitzmiller, you're obviously an intelligent man, but even though no harm befell you, John Brown and his men did take hostages, did they not?
Yes,
They did try and start a slave boat, did they not?
yes,
They did seize a federal arsenal, did they not?
yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
The defense would like to call up Harry Hunter.
Raise your right hand. Please swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Mr. Hunter, you're testifying to Captain Brown, are you not?
I have not made my choice.
What is your relationship to the late Mayor Thompson Becca, who was killed in this unfortunate incident?
He was my granduncle.
When I say the name Dauphin Thompson, what do you think?
I think of the man who murdered my granduncle.
Did you feel anger at Dauphin Thompson?
Yes.
Do you have any proof that it was Mr. Thompson that killed your granduncle?
No.
Who fired the shots that killed Mr. Thompson?
Me and another man shot 12 balls into his body or even more.
What happened to Thompson's body after you fired the fatal shots?
Me and another man carried his body out to the trestle work and threw it over.
So just to be clear, what role did you play in throwing his body?
I got rid of the body and the evidence.
Are you aware, Mr. Hunter, that they actually perpetuated against Mr. Thompson mob violence, vigilante justice, that these acts are no better than the acts that you John Brown?
Yes, I am aware of what I did, but I acted upon self-defense because I found him as a threat.
Do you feel any regrets for your part in the murdering of a man not yet found guilty of any case?
I am not sure what I am feeling. I thought I justified the murder of my granduncle, but now I am not
Justify
sure.
the murder of Dauphin Thompson?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution, Your Honor, chooses not to cross-examine Henry Hunter, who is the son of one of the prosecuting attorneys. You may be seated. Witnesses. Jurors, we have now heard the evidence from the mouths of the witnesses presented here and the summary arguments of the attorneys. It is now time for you to make a judgment. Please be aware that you are to make a decision based only on the testimony and evidence in connection with these alleged charges. Your Honor, please. The prosecution may now make their summations.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to begin my closing remarks, I quote Thoreau's civil disobedience. But even suppose blood should flow, is there not a sort of bloodshed in which the conscience is wounded? John Brown chose to act violently and unfairly to the citizens of Harper's Ferry, resulting in the seizure of the city's arsenal, the kidnapping of 60 innocent townspeople, and the death of 5 innocent men, including Shepherd Hayward, who was a free black man. Just because John Brown's conscience was wounded does not mean he could wound and endanger others who were caught in his so-called uprising. For the charge of murder, I see no hesitation, because John Brown and his men killed brutally 5 men, and yet with no remorse. We shouldn't allow this act of violence to go unnoticed and unpunished. And I feel for the weeping families that have lost someone dear to them. Thereafter, as if he wasn't pleased, he captured our city's arsenal in hopes for his cause. And if that's not enough to prove treason, let us also look at his plans of conspiracy against our hard-working government. With testimony from Mr. Phelps, we see John Brown try and form a government under his selfish ways of thought, trying to overthrow the one we already have. I like to remind the jury that this is not about morals. This is a case to try and punish John Brown for the crimes that he has committed against us as a people. Don't allow sympathy for this man, if he is yet man anymore, because with all of these things that he proves, murder, treason, conspiracy, why would he let a man who have done these things go free? I feel the need to express that this is not about slavery. This is not about what our government has chosen to do, and this is not about the way he may have treated his hostages or his own personal afflictions. John Brown has committed murder, treason, and conspiracy, and should be held to that. Because he is guilty, send him to his maker. That is all.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Captain John Brown was simply exercising his rights as an American citizen. In the Declaration of Independence, it clearly states that whenever any form of government is found destructive to these ends, it is the right and the obligation of the citizens to not only alter, but abolish it and institute a new government. Captain John Brown was in the process of instituting this new government. Because the government of the United States has been constantly oppressing over 4 million people. What choice did John Brown have other than to rebel? Our government has failed to address the unjust treatment of millions of people in America. To give you a more clear picture, currently, as of 1850, there are over 23 million slaves in America. The hypocrisy of having a fugitive slave law in our own Constitution should in itself be offensive to us all. Our Supreme Government, in the Dred Scott case, not only embarrassed but dehumanized over millions of slaves, calling them property and not citizens. Our own Congress continues to compromise on the issue of slavery, as of the Compromise of 1850, using popular severity, a state can whether be a free or a slave state. These acts are in opposition to our founding documents that say that all men are born equal. It is in every man's right to be equal, yet the slaves that John Brown so courageously stood up for are not, and every day, hundreds of them are raped, tortured, and even killed. John Brown did what any decent American should have done and defended the people who have suffered through enough, and in the process of being an upstander, lost 2 of his sons. Southerners trying to defend this unjust treatment caused the violence and the deaths at Harper's Ferry. It was the actions of the citizens who did kill people, unlike Captain Brown, which have caused the death of 10 innocent people. Is the government really the victim here? I think not, considering that Mr. Brown is here, bloody and beaten within inches of his life. It was not Captain Brown that attacked people, but the people who attacked Captain Brown. After that, Mr. Brown was simply exercising the right to defend himself. I plead that you look deeply within yourselves and that you realize that John Brown did nothing wrong, and that it is not against the law to defend himself. That is all.
Jurors, you've now heard the evidence from the mouths of the witnesses presented here and the summary arguments of the attorneys. It is now time for you to make a judgment. Please be aware that you will make a decision based only on the testimony and evidence in connection with these alleged charges that you have put in this court. The defendant should not be judged on past or possible future behavior, only on these charges. Biehl, will you please take the jury to the side chamber to make these questions so they may deliberate and render a verdict.
First I have to say that it's no surprise to me that I've been set free. It is God's will that I carry on His plan for equality for man, and I will do so. Also, if anything, the townspeople should have been on trial. But I do apologize for the violence that occurred. That was not what I had planned. But for those people that were harmed or killed, I sincerely apologize. It was not my intentions to harm or kill anyone in this act. But for those people of the jury that found me innocent, I am extremely thankful for your decision on setting me free and proving that my act was completely justified. That is all, Your Honor.
Thank you to the jurors, participants, and attorneys in this case. Court adjourned.
Is he more alive than he ever was? He has earned immortality. He is no longer working in a secret. He is working in public and in the clearest light that shines in this land. Henry David Thoreau.
John Brown did not end the war that ended slavery. He did at least begin the war that ended slavery. If we look over the dates, places, and men for which this honor is claimed, we shall find that not Carolina, but Virginia, not Fort Sumter, but Harper's Ferry, and the Arsenal, not Colonial Anderson, but John Brown, began the war and that ended
American slavery and made this a free republic. Until this blow was struck, the prospect for freedom was dim, shadowy, and uncertain. The irrepressible conflict was one of words, votes, and compromises. When John Brown stretched forth his arm, the sky was clear. Frederick Douglass.
Folks, thank you so much for coming. Audience, you were awesome, attentive. Please give a big round of applause.